So in this lecture video, I will be talking about the competency analyzing connections among social, economic, and environmental systems, focusing on global, community, and individual actions. Okay, so just as a reminder, social, economic, and environmental systems are basically the three P's: people, planet, obviously, and profit, which is economic. So there are a few international in this case, treaties that actually govern sustainability and environmental law. I'm actually going to just blast through this, but the most important thing right now that is current and the most of recent memory is the Paris Accord in 2015. And the basis of the Paris Accord is for all the countries of the world to actually, in this case, decrease their release of carbon dioxide, primarily carbon dioxide, and other global, in this case, and other greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. Okay, and the main drive of that of the treaty is to actually keep the increase of the global temperature below 2 degrees Celsius, which is 3.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, so, and again, there's a lot of other like little nuances in there, but that is actually the whole gist of the 2015 Paris Accord. Okay, decrease carbon emissions. Okay, now why do we need, so how can we actually in this case agree on decreasing, or in this case keeping the increase of global temperatures below 2 degrees? So there's a bunch of numbers out there. Okay, but I'm going to tell you the consensus data right now is that at this point in time, human activity, anthropogenic activities, have probably released around almost 550, close to 600 gigatons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So we're only talking about carbon dioxide here. We're not even talking about nitrous oxide, okay, or sulfur dioxide, which are also potent, and even methane, which are also potent global greenhouse gases. Okay, so we're only talking about carbon dioxide. Now, one of the ways that you have to think about this is what we're trying to avoid is getting into 800 gigatons of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. 800 gigatons of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Most scientists will agree 66% likelihood that the actual temperature of the globe is actually going to increase by greater than 2 degrees. And so that's where the 531 and the 275 gigatons come from. These are actually all in gigatons. And this is actually a misconception here. We actually don't have 746 global fossil fuel reserves. That's actually just tappable, or actually in this case accessible. We actually probably have like thousands of fossil fuel reserves in gigatons. Okay, so again, the key is we're trying to keep our case in this case our carbon dioxide emissions below 275 gigatons from this point on. So that's actually the goal. All right. Now, the problem of that obviously is the biggest sources of energy for the world is primarily from fossil fuels, which obviously fossil fuels release carbon dioxide among many other things into the atmosphere. And again, we should all understand this point that carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas, and it keeps the temperatures in the globe actually warmer than they ought to be. Okay, and if you can see at this one, oil, gas, coal, all right, these three colors here, blue, orange, and yellow, makes up, if you add all of these things together, make up bulk, okay, almost 70% in this case, all right, in fact, past 70%. So what we're trying to do is, and part again of the Paris Accord is, we're trying to increase primarily some of these renewable sources, and primarily decrease most of these non-renewable sources of fossil fuels. Okay. Now, why do we prefer, in this case, fossil fuels? Well, the reason why fossil fuels are the biggest source of energy in the world is because fossil fuels, if you look at all of these things, gasoline, diesel, all of that stuff, has the highest density, okay, of energy per cubic feet. So this is cubic feet. All right. So as you can see, diesel fuel gives you 1,058 British thermal units per cubic feet, and all the way down here, hydrogen in this case, like a hydrogen in this case, cell actually only gives you 68 British thermal units per cubic feet. So as you can see, a lot of these renewable, sides are actually less efficient, or not less efficient, I should say that, gives you least heat, least energy, less energy as opposed to fossil fuels. So this is the big quandary right now. Okay. The other thing obviously is, like if you can lithium ion, nickel, batteries, all of those things is also the efficiency of technology. As technology eventually improves, the efficiency of a lot of these things are eventually going to increase and hopefully surpass the British thermal units yield. Like when you're comparing, again, fossil fuels and renewable, like batteries in this case. Okay, so again, that's the problem, right? So we don't get enough bang for a buck when we use a lot of alternative energy sources or alternative energy storage sources. Okay, I should say ethanol. If you can see ethanol, which we've been utilizing in corn crops, which is actually a danger in itself, gives you 633 British thermal units per cubic feet. Methanol, same, butanol, but again, diesel. As you can see, diesel is way up there. All right, and that's why diesel is preferred, FYI, like for a lot of high performance vehicles, right? Because it burns better. So that's that. So that is the previous slides is about the global scope of things and why we need to keep the temperatures down. Now we are moving on now into community, in this case, community approaches to sustainability. So currently right now in the world, around 55% of the total population of the world actually lives in urban populations, so cities in this case. So cities are dense, highly dense, densely populated areas. So which means to say that there is going to be a high use of resources, and that's very, 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 very compact area because there's more people. So that is actually, so the problem with living in a city, I don't know if you know this, is when you have more people living in a smaller square area, and the smaller area, obviously the resource, there's a resource intensivity that actually is inherent in one of those in the city, right? You need to have power in that area to generate electricity for multiple people, lots and lots and lots of people. There'll probably be a lot of vehicles in that area. There's probably a lot of water uses in that area. There's probably a lot of waste in that area. So, and that is why there's three main things that is actually, in this case, related to what a sustainability actually is. And that is, you need to have a diverse ecological systems. So what that is green space. That's actually the bottom line. You want green space, and you want trees, and you want ponds, and you want lakes inside your city. You just don't want to have buildings and concrete, and that's it, right? And if you've ever been to Vegas, you know what I mean. Right? Social foundation is also very, very important. And the reason why social foundation is very, very important is you want to make sure, right, that you don't have a population in a city which in this case is underperforming because they are, in this case, undernourished, or in this case, do not have the proper resources to actually flourish or to thrive in a city setting, right? Because what happens then is, if you remember this, if you have a very, very weak social foundation, right? And social foundation could be employment or anything like that, which is a diverse economy. The support system is not there, and then you actually have homeless problems. You have people with psychological issues, just like moving around. And the other thing about social foundation is you need to have trust, right, between members of your city, right? You don't want to have, in this case, groups that kind of dislike each other, right? Because that is obviously a recipe for violence, a recipe for mistrust. And obviously mistrust means no one will want to give up anything in order to make a city better. So that's a very, very important aspect of a sustainable city. The last thing is obviously is a diverse economy. You need to have, again, and if remember now, again, this is going back to the 3 Ps. In every facet of human life, we need to consider people, profit, and definitely the planet. So again, this is boiling down to those 3 Ps. Very, very important here. Now, obviously, we need a diverse economy. Why? if let's say if you're a town and all you do and all your industry is in one industry, let's say automobile industry, right? Like an auto industry, like you just make cars. Well, what happens when cars go away? Then basically the employment prospects of your city basically just plummets. And now you're going to have boarded up houses. Obviously, all of those things happen. And like Detroit, just look at Detroit, what's going on in Detroit. And obviously, violence goes up, social foundations break down. And the good thing about that, obviously, is when you have less people in a city, is actually the ecological system actually comes back. Okay, but I digress. Again, we need to have a balance between the three P's: people, planet, okay, and profit. Now, in terms of individual, and in terms of individual responsibilities, or in this case actions for the sustainable movement for the environment. So Garrett Hardin is an economist who actually had an essay in 1968 called "The Tragedy of the Commons," and the commons in this case is actually talking about resources that is common to all citizens of an area, of the planet, period, right? And he's talking about obviously the environment, okay? And obviously there is a correlation between how the environment is actually degraded and population growth. We already focused on that last week. So the higher the population, the more you use the environment, and obviously the more you use the environment, there are a lot of problems that rises from that itself. All right. So the tragedy of the commons, basically the concept behind the tragedy of the commons, I'm sorry about that, is what happens is if everyone profits from common resources, there is an economic imperative or an economic incentive for individuals to actually take advantage of the system. So what happens is, if I can make money from water, I'm going to take as much water as I want, right? Or as much water as I can. Right? So, but the problem is let's say, and I'm just going to flip this on its head. If let's say, if everyone in the Lake Michigan area, if all the people who live by the lake thinks that the lake is themselves, now everyone can pump out water, right? So that is actually why we have a Lake Michigan Consortium, okay, which is actually all the states and all the countries that surround Lake Michigan, right, or the Great Lakes. So if I pump, let's say if I start pumping out water from Lake Michigan, because I'm going to make money by selling, barrels of water to Arizona, for example, well, that will induce my neighbor to also do the same. And pretty soon, guess what? There's no more water in Lake Michigan because we all pump it to Arizona because Arizona is paying $1,000 per barrel, right? So obviously in that case, now the resource is gone, right? Now what happens now? Now in its turn, now we don't have water for ourselves now, right? Now we're going to have a scarcity, and now basically the social, right, the social aspect, now the trust gets degraded. Obviously there's no economic, there's no economic incentive anymore for us to live in Wisconsin, and everyone lives in Wisconsin. Okay, and everything about common resources is also again balancing the 5th and 14th Amendment, which is about, like in this case, private ownership and the public good. All right, so that's a very, very important thing here. But so in this case, this video is quite brief, but again, I'm just trying to give you a sense of how these are all connected in this case. But regardless of the content of this lecture video, and please read the entirety of all of the slides, it is all about the 3 P's, okay? Every human activity needs to be evaluated based on its impact on the 3 P's. How does it impact the people? How does it impact the planet? And how does it impact profit? Okay, so again, and obviously we can take steps in multiple levels, whether it's in multinational organizations like the United Nations, in our state, obviously in our cities in Manitowoc and Sheboygan, and obviously us as individuals. And that is again the purpose behind your 2 reflective papers. All right, so I'm hoping that you are exerting some effort in creating a better and sustainable environment by implementing some conservation techniques in your reflective papers.